Imagine watching massive tech giants lay off thousands of American workers.
Right.
Just huge, sweeping cuts.
Right. Yeah, we've all seen the headlines.
Yeah, but then simultaneously, those exact same companies are fighting tooth and nail to import foreign labor.
It is a wild contradiction to look at.
It really is. So today's deep dive is looking at this explosive battle over the H-1B visa and specifically the recent highly aggressive comments by J.D. Vance that have basically turned a piece of bureaucratic immigration policy into, well, a defining political flashpoint.
Yeah, we are looking at a policy landscape that is actively on fire right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is dominating boardrooms, it's dominating political rallies, and it is fundamentally shaping the modern workforce.
Definitely. And we've got a whole stack of source material today analyzing both sides of this. We've got the fierce argument from political critics, and then, the staunch, heavily resourced corporate defenses coming straight out of Silicon Valley.
Two very, very different worlds colliding.
Exactly. And I want to say up front, because this issue is actively being weaponized on the campaign trail right now, our job today isn't to pick a political side.
Right, absolutely not.
We are just going to look under the hood at the architecture of these arguments. We want to impartially unpack the underlying logic of the original material so you, the listener, can actually understand the friction here. We're not endorsing any of it, just acting as your guides.
Yeah, we're just laying out the blueprints of the debate so you can see why they're clashing so hard.
Right. And I want you to consider a massive, multi-billion-dollar question as we go through this today. Is the H-1B visa system actively stealing jobs from American workers? Or is it the absolute undeniable backbone of the U.S. economy?
Because depending on who you ask, you get completely opposite answers.
You really do. Okay, let's unpack this. Think of Silicon Valley for a second. It is arguably the most exclusive high-stakes club on the planet right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. And the H-1B visa, it is essentially a highly coveted VIP pass into that club. Like, everyone is fighting over it. But to understand why J.D. Vance is attacking the system so fiercely, we first need to understand the mechanics of what the system actually is.
Right. So at its core, the H-1B is a special United States work visa. It's designed specifically to bring foreign professionals into the country to work in what they call specialty occupations.
Specialty occupation. So what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, that term is key. We're talking about highly technical roles that require a bachelor's degree or higher. So engineers, software developers, data scientists, and the sources note that the professionals utilizing this specific visa overwhelmingly originate from two countries, India and China.
India and China. Okay.
Yeah, and they're coming to the U.S. primarily to fuel the tech industry.
But we aren't just talking about a steady stream of open doors, right? Like, there's a limit to this.
Oh, a very strict limit. There is a rigid mathematical cap on this.
Huh.
Congress limits the number of new H-1B visas to something like 85,000 a year.
Which sounds like a lot, but
But the demand from companies is astronomically higher. I mean, hundreds of thousands of applications pour in every year.
so how do they decide who gets one if there's 85,000 spots and way more people applying?
That's the crazy part. It operates as a lottery.
Wait, really? A lottery?
Literally a random draw. You have brilliant engineers and massive corporations just waiting to see if their number gets pulled from a digital hat. It is an incredibly high-stress bottleneck for everyone involved.
Wow. And the heavyweights, depending on those lottery draws, I mean, they are the absolute titans of the modern economy. We're talking Google, Microsoft, Amazon.
Oh yeah, the biggest players.
And they are fiercely defending their right to hand out these VIP passes. And their defense, according to the sources, is built on the premise that talent and competition are strictly global.
Right, they don't see borders when it comes to hiring.
Exactly. They claim there is a severe, quantifiable shortage of skilled workers within the United States. So according to their narrative, bringing in this specific H-1B talent isn't just a cost-saving measure. They argue it directly fuels innovation.
And by fueling innovation, it boosts the entire U.S. economy.
Right. The argument is basically, hey, if we don't hire the absolute best machine learning engineer from India, a competitor in another country is going to hire them, and the U.S. loses that economic momentum.
Which is a very compelling argument from a corporate standpoint.
It is, but let me push back on that corporate narrative for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Because if the tech industry is so incredibly innovative, I mean, if they can build artificial intelligence that writes code and, map the human genome, Why can't they just train domestic
That's the
workers?
million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. Like, why is this specific global talent pool so entirely irreplaceable that they have to rely on a complex randomized visa lottery? Help me understand the underlying logic there.
Okay, so the tech industry's logic is rooted entirely in velocity.
Velocity, like
Yep.
speed.
Exactly. The pace of technological advancement right now is just so rapid. They argue that traditional U.S. educational institutions like your standard four-year university computer science programs, they simply cannot produce graduates with the hyper-specialized skills needed at the speed they are required.
Because the tech moves faster than the curriculum.
Precisely. By the time a student finishes a four-year degree, the landscape of large language models or cloud architecture has completely transformed two or three times over.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So the companies argue they aren't ignoring domestic workers. They're saying the immediate high-level skills they need to survive global competition currently exist in a global pool right this second, and they need immediate access to it just to keep building.
Okay, that velocity excuse makes sense in a vacuum. If you wait for the domestic pipeline to catch up, the technology's already moved on.
Right.
But that excuse kind of shatters the second you look at what these companies are actually doing with their domestic workforce, which is exactly the vulnerability J.D. Vance is attacking.
Yeah, and J.D. Vance's core claim is a direct assault on that economic miracle narrative that Silicon Valley pushes.
What's this main argument based on the text?
He is accusing the tech industry of actively using the H-1B visa system against American workers. He basically has three pillars to his argument. First, that companies simply prefer cheaper foreign labor.
Okay.
Second, that U.S. graduates are being denied a fair chance at these jobs because of that preference.
And the third.
Well, the third is where it gets into the hypocrisy he sees in the system.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the most startling paradox in the entire debate, the one the sources highlight, is what J.D. Vance points out about the layoffs.
The timing of the layoffs is just incredible.
Right. He highlights that tech companies are continuing to hire massive numbers of foreign workers via the H-1B system, even while massive tech layoffs are happening domestically.
What's fascinating here is how Vance uses that specific juxtaposition. By placing domestic layoffs right next to continued foreign hiring, he aggressively challenges the talent shortage narrative pushed by Google, Amazon, and Microsoft.
Because it looks terrible on paper. You see thousands of American tech workers losing their jobs, packing up their desks at these huge campuses.
Yeah, brutal layoffs.
And simultaneously, those exact same companies are fighting in a lottery to import labor.
Exactly. Vance's underlying logic is, how can you possibly claim there is a severe shortage of skilled tech workers in the United States when you are actively firing thousands of skilled tech workers in the United States?
It's a massive contradiction.
It is.
Yeah.
He uses that friction to suggest the real motivation isn't a lack of talent at all, but a desire for a more controllable, less expensive workforce.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of how this visa is structured. J.D. Vance argues that companies prefer cheaper foreign labor and that U.S. graduates are actively being denied a fair chance. But how exactly does an H-1B visa create a cheaper or controllable workforce?
That's a great point to dig into.
Right, because a software engineer at Google is going to make a high salary regardless of where they are from, right? They aren't paying the minimum wage. So where does the wage suppression actually happen?
It happens through the mechanism of sponsorship.
Sponsorship.
Right.
Yeah.
An H-1B visa isn't a free pass to work anywhere in the U.S. It is specifically tied to the employer who sponsored it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So if an H-1B worker complains about their wages or asks for a massive raise or decides they want to quit and go work for a rival startup, they run a massive risk.
What kind of risk?
Well, if they lose that job, whether they quit or are fired, they typically have a 60-day grace period to find a new employer willing to sponsor their visa.
And if they don't?
They are legally required to leave the country.
Oh, wow. So their literal right to live in the United States is being held by their boss.
Yes.
That entirely changes the power dynamic in a salary negotiation.
Precisely. The lack of mobility is the mechanism that suppresses their negotiating power. A domestic worker can walk away from a bad offer or demand market rate because the worst that happens is, they're temporarily unemployed.
Right, they just update their resume.
Exactly. But for an H-1B worker, the worst that happens is uprooting their entire life and facing deportation. Vance's argument is that tech companies know this, and they exploit that inherent lack of leverage to keep labor costs down and maintain a captive workforce.
To me, it's like looking at a really powerful piece of software.
How do you mean?
Well, The architects designed this software, the H-1B system, to do something incredible, right? To bridge a genuine skills gap, handle that velocity of innovation we talked about, and build the future. And it can be used exactly as intended.
Right.
But just like any complex piece of software, it has bugs and loopholes. And when a system has loopholes, users will inevitably exploit them.
Oh, definitely. And the biggest loophole in this entire system, the one that really proves your analogy, is the rise of massive global outsourcing firms.
Outsourcing firms, how do they fit into the lottery?
Well, while companies like Apple or Microsoft might use the visa as intended to hire a specific brilliant engineer, there are giant IT outsourcing companies that basically game the system.
How do they game a random lottery?
Because it is a random lottery, these outsourcing firms will flood the system. They submit hundreds of thousands of applications for relatively lower-level IT workers.
Oh, I get it. They buy up all the lottery tickets.
Exactly. They mathematically crowd out the direct hire tech companies. Then, once these outsourcing firms secure the visas, they bring the workers over and contract them out to other corporations.
Usually for less money, I assume.
Yeah, often it's significantly lower wages than a domestic worker would demand. This is the specific structural flaw that validates the critics' claims of wage suppression.
So it's a secondary market.
Exactly. It isn't necessarily the core tech giants doing the suppressing directly. It is this secondary market of outsourcing firms exploiting the lottery mechanism to flood the market with cheaper captive contract labor.
So Google says, we need visas because we can't find hyper-specialized people fast enough.
Right.
And Vance says, you are firing people, and the system is being gamed by outsourcing firms to undercut wages, so your claim is fundamentally false. It is a massive collision of two completely opposite narratives.
Yeah, it really is.
So based on the sources, where does the actual truth lie?
The reality is entirely mixed. Both things are happening at the exact same time.
Really?
Yeah. There is undeniable misuse of the system, particularly through those outsourcing loopholes, which suppresses wages and bypasses domestic talent.
Okay, so the critics are right about that.
Right. But simultaneously, there's a genuine critical need for high-skill talent at the bleeding edge of tech that truly cannot be sourced fast enough domestically.
So the tech companies are right about that.
Exactly. The system is simultaneously the innovation engine Silicon Valley claims it is, and the flawed, exploitable loophole J.D. Vance claims it is.
It's both. But we have to make sure we don't just talk about this as an abstract economic concept, right? We have to talk about the human element, because this isn't just about corporate spreadsheets and political talking points.
No, not at all.
The sources highlight that Indians make up the absolute largest share of H-1B visa holders. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people, and by extension, millions of family members.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal amount of human capital tied to a single, highly precarious bureaucratic thread.
Think about the psychological toll of that 60-day grace period we just talked about. Imagine you get that coveted VIP pass, you move from Bangalore to Seattle, you buy a house.
Right, you settle down.
Yeah, your kids are enrolled in the local public school, making friends, living their lives. And then one morning, your company announces a 10% workforce reduction just to appease shareholders.
And suddenly your whole world collapses. You don't just lose your income. A 60-day countdown clock starts on your family's entire existence in the country.
It's terrifying. You have 2 months to somehow secure a new job in the middle of an industry-wide layoff wave, mind you.
Good luck with that.
Right. You have to find a company willing to take on the complex legal paperwork of transferring your visa, or you have to sell your house, pull your kids out of school, and fly across the world. The human stakes here are staggering.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound illustration of modern globalization. You have a domestic United States policy debate, like arguments happening in Washington, D.C., or on a campaign trail in Ohio, creating massive real-world anxiety for families across the globe.
Yeah.
Their future is entirely tethered to a political argument they cannot even vote in.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. The stress of that mixed reality, knowing you are deeply needed by the technology sector, but actively targeted by political rhetoric, is a defining feature of the H-1B experience.
And that stress is only going to amplify.
Okay.
Because this issue touches both the core of the U.S. economy and international lives so deeply, it is rapidly becoming a central battlefield.
Oh, absolutely.
As we look at the horizon, specifically the rapidly approaching 2026 elections, immigration and the H-1B in particular is becoming intensely heated.
Yeah, and the partisan divide is crystallizing very clearly in the source material. We are seeing a distinct fracture in how the two major political parties intend to handle this friction we've been discussing.
How so?
Well, the Republicans are firmly pushing for stricter rules. Their platform, heavily influenced by rhetoric like J.D. Vance's, is focused on tightening the valve, drastically increasing restrictions, and prioritizing domestic labor protection over corporate access to global talent.
They want to shut the loopholes.
Right. They want to shut down the loopholes by squeezing the program as a whole.
I would imagine that creates a massive lobbying panic in Silicon Valley. But what is the alternative being proposed? Like, what are the Democrats pushing for?
The Democrats are generally pushing for reform rather than restriction. Their approach acknowledges the flaws they recognize, the outsourcing firms gaming the lottery, and the wage suppression caused by the captive workforce mechanic. But they seek to restructure the visa process to protect workers rather than eliminate the pipeline.
So they want to patch the software, to use your analogy earlier.
Exactly. Patch the software rather than uninstall it entirely. They propose things like increasing wage minimums for visa holders to prevent undercutting, or making it easier for workers to change jobs to remove that 60-day deportation threat.
Which would remove that captive leverage that companies have.
Right.
Meanwhile, J.D. Vance's highly aggressive framing of the issue is actively pulling the entire debate toward a more polarized space. By framing it as an active betrayal of the American worker, he makes it a deeply emotional, high-stakes issue for voters.
It certainly does.
And it becomes very difficult for either side to quietly compromise on a bureaucratic fix when the rhetoric is at a boiling point like that.
This raises an important question. Ultimately, will the H-1B visa be entirely eliminated, or will the system be reformed? The tension between elimination and reform is the crux of the upcoming political showdown.
And the fallout from whatever decision is made won't just hit America, it will send a shockwave across the entire world.
Absolutely.
If the U.S. suddenly shuts the door on global tech talent, where does that talent go? Do they go to Canada, which has been, actively trying to poach tech workers frustrated by the U.S. system?
And Canada is definitely watching this closely.
Right. Or do they stay in Bangalore and build competing empires there?
The global tech ecosystem is incredibly fragile in that regard. A single policy shift in Washington can redraw the map of global innovation overnight. If the talent cannot physically come to Silicon Valley will slowly lose its monopoly on the future.
That's a huge point. Let's pull all of this together.
Okay.
We started by looking at big tech, the Googles and Amazons of the world, who see the H-1B visa as an absolute non-negotiable necessity.
Yeah, their innovation engine.
Right. They argued the velocity of tech requires immediate access to the best minds on Earth, no matter where they are born. Then we examine the mechanics behind the fierce counter-narrative from critics like J.D. Vance.
And Vance's argument is strong on paper.
Definitely. By pointing out the paradox of domestic layoffs happening alongside foreign hiring and highlighting how a visa tied to a single employer artificially suppresses wages, critics see a massive loophole designed to undercut American graduates.
And right in the middle of those two extremes, we found a very messy reality.
Very messy.
A reality where systemic misuse by outsourcing firms undeniably exists, alongside a genuine, desperate need for specialized skills. And caught in the crossfire of that messy reality are hundreds of thousands of human beings living their lives on a 60-day countdown clock.
So what does this all mean? Why should you care about the intricacies of a visa lottery or a political talking point from J.D. Vance?
It's a good question to ask.
Because whether you work in the tech industry, whether you follow global politics, or whether you simply use the digital products built by these massive companies every single day, this debate is going to fundamentally shape the future of global innovation.
It really is.
It is going to dictate how labor is valued, who gets leverage in the job market, and what country gets to claim ownership over the next massive technological leap.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we've discussed today about this clash over physical visas and borders.
Okay, let's hear it.
If talent is truly global, as the tech giants so aggressively claim, and we now live in an era of unprecedented, seamless remote work infrastructure, will physical visas like the H-1B even be the main battleground in the future? Or will these massive tech giants simply bypass the U.S. visa system entirely, circumventing the political headache by hiring that exact same top-tier global talent to work fully remotely from their home countries?
Wow, that completely changes the game.
It makes the border irrelevant.
It really does. If the VIP pass into Silicon Valley becomes a Zoom link instead of a stamped passport, the entire foundation of this political argument just evaporates. J.D. Vance and Google could be fighting a bitter war over a border that the technology itself is about to make completely obsolete.
Exactly.
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking for the mechanics behind the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.